Hello everyone. In this session, we are going to discuss a very important topic for your exam, and this is robotics and artificial intelligence. Now, when we talk about this particular chapter of robotics and artificial intelligence, first of all, if we talk about this from the point of view of your prelims and your mains examination, if you go back to your previous year question papers, you will see that not a lot of questions come from here. So if I divide this chapter into two parts, one being robotics and the second being artificial intelligence. So when we talk about robotics, in case of robotics, you will see that the questions that have come in the mains examination. And that too, you will see that not very often a question is asked. For example, if you look at past 10 years or even past 15 years of question papers, you'll see that hardly 2 or 3 questions have come from here. So from that perspective, it might seem like this is not a very important chapter. But at the same time, you have to understand that because of the kinds of things that are happening in the world, all the new developments that we see in the world, because of that, we can say that this is a very, very important chapter. Because there are a lot of developments, lot of scientific achievements that have been done in the field of robotics and in the field of artificial intelligence. So that's why this becomes a very important chapter. But if we take robotics, for example, we'll see that not a lot of questions have come. It doesn't mean that question will not come from here. It remains a very important chapter. If we talk about the prelims examination from robotics, we have seen that almost nothing has been asked, but yet it remains a very, very important chapter, and especially from the point of view of current affairs, right? So this is about robotics. When we talk about artificial intelligence is the portion from where relatively more questions have come in the examination as compared to robotics. So that's why it remains a more important chapter, or more important rather topic in this chapter from the perspective of your examination. So we'll look into both the areas one by one. We'll try to understand what are the areas from where the questions can come, what are the things which are important for your examination, and how exactly questions can be framed from these kind of areas. All right, so let's begin. So first of all, if we talk about robotics, from the perspective of robotics, most importantly, you have to understand the applications of robotics. Application not in just a general term, but sector wise. You have to understand that in each and every sector, what is the way in which robotics can be utilized. So for example, how would you utilize robotics in defense? How would you utilize robotics in medicine? So in that manner, you have to understand that each and every sector, how do we make the use of robotics? All right, so this is how we have to learn this chapter. Apart from that, every other thing, for example, the basics of robotics, what do we mean by robotics, what are the parts of a robot, these are the things that we'll understand. And towards the end, we'll look into the negative aspects of robotics. What are the various areas of problems associated with robotics? All right, so first of all, when we talk about robotics, what do we mean by robotics? So I am very sure that you all have heard about this term, that is robot, right? You definitely know about this term robot. So when we say robot, whenever you imagine a robot, you think like a machine which is walking and talking and perhaps doing a lot of work for you. But you have to understand that robotics is any mechanical machine, any machine that can be automated to do the work that was mechanically being done by a human. So any machine that has been made in such a way that it can substitute human labor can be called as a robot. And the field of science that deals with the study of robots can be called as robotics. Correct? So first of all, when we talk about robotics, what do we mean by robotics? An interdisciplinary sector of science and engineering dedicated to the design, construction, and use of mechanical robots in various fields. All right. So design, construction, and use of mechanical robots in various fields. So that's why I said that wherever we are trying to substitute the human labor, you can say that we are making the use of robotics. Whenever machines are substituting human labor, we'll say that we are making the use of robotics. So as I said that whenever we think of a robot, we tend to think of a walking and talking machine, but it may not necessarily be so. These are kinds of robots which are more of a humanoid robots, but robots can be any machine which has been made to substitute the human labor. All right, robots are intelligent machines that sense and manipulate their environment. Now, before we move forward and understand the various areas of application, something that is very, very important and unique to robotics is Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. Now, what do we mean by these three laws? Now, first of all, you have to understand that these are not laws similar to the laws of physics. For example, when in physics we say laws of motion or universal law of gravitation, we actually have established law and everything actually works according to these laws of physics. But when we talk about laws of robotics, they are not very similar. So in case of laws of robotics, there are three laws that was given by Isaac Asimov. What were the three laws? The first law says a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. That neither a robot can harm a human being nor it can allow a human to come to harm by its inaction. Correct? Meaning that neither it can harm nor it can allow the harm to happen to a human. This was the first law that he had given. Then what was the second law? The second law says that a robot must obey orders given to it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. That is, any order that has been given to a robot by a human has to be fulfilled. The robot needs to obey to these laws. But at the same time, if these laws have been given in such a manner that if a robot obeys these laws, it would be harming another human being, then in that case, this robot has to ensure that it does not obey the order. So, first law says that a robot will never let a human to come to harm or never will harm a human being. Second law says that any order that has been given by a human has to be obeyed by the robot. At the same time, if the orders are to harm another human being, then in that case, the robot has to ensure that it does not follow the orders. What's the third law? The third law says a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first and the second law. Meaning what? A robot has to ensure that it is able to protect itself. But at the same time, it also has to ensure that while protecting itself, it is not harming another human being. So that's why we are saying that while protecting itself, it should not be coming in conflict with the first or the second laws. So these are the three laws that were given by Isaac Asimov. Now, why do we say that these are not similar to the physics laws? The main reason is that these are more of an instruction or a guideline. That if you are working in the field of robotics, if you are building a robot, these are the three things that you should keep in mind. So it's not something which is universally accepted theory as would be the case with laws of motion or law of gravitation. It is something which can be seen more as a guideline. That look, if you are working in the field of robotics, then these are the guidelines that you have to adhere to. These are the instructions that you have to follow if you are making a robot. Now, this becomes very essential because if we are talking about the robots and the field of robotics, today we know that there are a lot of areas in which robotics can be used. And many a times, especially if we are talking about defense, then in that case, there is a possibility that we are actually not confining to the laws that have been given. For example, if you have made a robotic army, the robotic army will harm somebody, correct? So if the robotic army is harming somebody, then in that case it is directly in conflict with the first and the second and the third laws, correct? So that's why we cannot say that this is a universal law, but these are more like guidelines. These are more like instructions if you are working in the field of robotics. First of all, if we talk about a robot, what do we mean by a robot and what are the different components of a robot? So look at this picture. First of all, you have a power source, correct? And for working of any machine, you would need a power source. So this will be an electrical power source which will provide all the energy that is required for any function to be carried out by a robot. Then after that, you have the controller. So controller will control all the activities of a robot. What kind of activities is supposed to happen, whatever the robot needs to do, everything will be monitored and controlled by this controller. So that's why in a manner we can say that this is nothing but just like the brain of a robot. This is just like the brain of a robot. Then after that you can see that there are other parts. So for example, you have the end effector. You can say that end effector is just like the hand of a robot. Meaning what? Any mechanical work that has to happen. So for example, let's say a robot has to pick something and place something somewhere. So in that case, this end effector is the one which will be utilized. So that's why it just works like our hands, that it will help in picking and grabbing something. So that's why these are called as hands of a robot. So this is nothing but the end effector. Then after that, you have the manipulator. And manipulator is also called as the arm of a robot. Manipulator will also be called as arm of a robot. Why? Because this is something that is helping in the movement of the hand or movement of the end effector. So that's why this is like the arm of a robot, that it will help in picking and placing something, and end effector can make the use of manipulator in this manner. Then after that you have the actuators and the sensors. So actuators are just like, you can say in a manner, the muscles of a robot. These are like the muscles of the robots because it has all the energy that has been supplied by the controller to carry out any activity. So that's why these are called as the muscle of a robot. And then you have the sensors. Sensors will be utilized to sense anything that is in the surrounding, because the robot needs to act according to what it senses. Correct? It needs to act according to what it sees in its surrounding, so that it can respond to whatever it sees in its surrounding, and it already has been programmed so that it knows how to act whenever such a surrounding has been observed. So this is the role of different parts. So just to summarize, first of all you have the controller. It coordinates all the movements of the mechanical system, also receives input from the immediate environment through various sensors. The heart of robots controller is generally a microprocessor linked to input, output and the monitoring device. Then after that you have the actuators. Remember we discussed that these are like the muscles of the robots. So these are those parts of the robot that convert the stored energy into movement. And that is why they have a significant role to play, because all the energy that has been stored, it will be converted into mechanical work with the help of actuators. Then after that you have the manipulator. As I discussed, that manipulator is like the arm of a robot. So it consists of segments that may be joined and that move about, allowing the robot to do the work. So it will help in movement of materials, parts, tools or special devices through various motions to provide the useful work. Then after that we have the end effector. As I discussed that these are like the hands of a robot, and that's why these are the end parts of the robot which will help in picking and placing things and the movement of whatever we want to do. So this is something that end effector will do. Then after that, as we discussed, you have the sensors. Sensors allow the robot to gather the information about its environment. This information can be used to guide the robot's behavior. Correct? So what we discussed is that if you have a sensor, sensor will analyze what is there in the surrounding, and the sensor will accordingly ask the robot to perform a function, and accordingly the robot will work. Then after that we have a power source. So power source will be required for providing any kind of energy that is required, so that this electrical energy that has been stored in the robot can be converted into mechanical energy, and thus the mechanical work can be carried out. So this is how the different components of a robot work. Now let's move on to the next segment, and this is application of robotics. Now as far as application of robotics is concerned, you know that world still is in a developing phase as far as robotics and artificial intelligence are concerned. Correct? So that's why all the sectors in one way or the other will definitely have the application of robotics. You take any sector. I have just taken some examples of some of the most crucial sectors, but be very sure that in each and every sector, in one way or the other, robotics can be made use of. And that's why this is something which is still developing. If you look in and around, if we are talking about our country, India, so you know that in India there are very small number of sectors which are actually using robots. In some industrial application, in some service sector, these are some of the only areas where robotics is actually being used. But there are areas where robotics can be used, and that's why future of robotics is something different. So if we talk about the application of robotics, let's look at some of the key areas which are important from perspective of robotics. First is military applications. So when we talk about military applications, there are n number of ways in which robots can be used. Correct? They can be used for search and rescue operations. They can be used for making a robotic army. They can be used to launch an attack on an enemy. They can be used for each and everything. So anything that has a mechanical job associated with it, any kind of mechanical job can be done by the help of robots. And that's why these kind of robots can be used in various ways. So it can be based on an application. It can be used in some areas which can be hazardous, for an actual human to go and do the work. In all these cases, we can make the use of robots. So military robots are remote controlled autonomous mobile robots that have been designed to carry out military tasks and actions such as search and rescue operations, transportation, and attacking the enemy, etc. So it can be used anywhere. As I said, that anywhere, wherever you have a mechanical work, robots can be used as a substitute for that mechanical work. So examples of military robots, we have DRDO Daksh in India. Apart from that, there are others like you have Elbit Hermes, you have RQ-9 Predator B, you have IAIO Fortress of Iran. These are just few of the examples. There are others as well. Then after that, we can talk about industrial application. So in case of industrial applications, they can be used in assembly lines. They can be used anywhere, wherever working for a human could be dangerous. They can be used anywhere where the work of the human is just to stand there and do a mechanical work without using his or her brain. Correct? So in all these areas, industrial applications can also be seen with the help of robotics. So some of the important applications include welding, assembly, pickup and placing, painting, packaging, labeling, product inspection, testing, etc. So all these industrial applications, we can definitely use robots. So there are some common configurations that are used. For example, you have the SCARA robots, you have the Delta robots, you have the Cartesian robots, you have the articulated robots. All these are different kinds of industrial robots which are used in various sectors. Then after that, we have agricultural application. Agricultural application wise, they can be used to drive a tractor. They can be used for cloud seeding. They can be used for harvesting. They can be used for soil analysis. They can be used for monitoring of a given area. So all these different kinds of applications they can be used for. So main areas of application: harvesting, cloud seeding, planting seeds, soil analysis, environmental monitoring, drones for weed control, etc. All these are the various ways in which agricultural applications can be seen. Then after that, robots are designed to replace the human labor, and this is something that we have been focusing on, replace the human labor. So fruit picking, operating driverless tractors, sprayers, sheep shearing, all these are the various ways in which robots can be used. Not only in the field, agricultural field, they can also be used in livestock management. So for example, rearing of the sheep, as we discussed. So there we can make the use of robots. Similarly, milking of cows, we can make the use of robots. We can make the use of robots in washing and castrations. All these are the various ways in which robots can be used. Then after that, we come to medical science. And medical science, mainly you have to understand that most important application of robots is in surgical applications. Wherever surgery has to happen, in these cases, we can make the use of robots. So they can be used as surgical robots. We have rehabilitation robots, telepresence robots, we have bio robots, we have disinfection robots, we have companion robots, we have pharmacy automation. All these are the various ways in which robotics can be made use of in the field of medical science. So for example, when we say rehabilitation robots, so rehabilitation robots are the ones which will help in physical rehabilitation. So many a times you will see that there are robots that will be taken help of for physical rehabilitation of patients. So these are the robots which are called as rehabilitation robots. Then similarly, you can see telepresence robots. So telepresence robots are the ones which will help in making the presence of another person be there. Specifically, if you look at the pandemic situation after COVID-19, we have seen that telepresence robots have been very useful in making sure that the patients and the doctors specifically are connected, and wherever physical presence of doctors are not possible, the gap can be filled by the help of telepresence robots. Similarly, you also have companion robots. Companion robots are the ones which basically will be the ones which will act as companions to the humans. So especially for the elderly, we see that companion robots are being used. So in all these various ways, we have seen that in the field of medical science, robots are being used. Similarly, in the field of pharmacy also, that instead of a human presence being there, the robots can take care of supplying of the medicines or passing on the medicines to whoever is there at the counter. So all these are various ways in which in the field of medical science robots can be made use of. Then after that we have nano robots. So nano robots, what is nano? We discussed nano in nanotechnology. So anything that is very small. So wherever you have robots which are very small, and if you are making the use of machines which are very small, which can travel, let's say, inside the bloodstream. For example, molecular machines exist. Nobel Prize in 2016 was given for the construction of molecular machines. So these molecular machines are nothing but very similar to how a nano robot will function. That you give it the instruction and it will carry out the functions accordingly. So these will be called as nanorobots. So they can be made use of in nanomedicine, where biological nanorobots may be used for identifying and destroying the cancer cells, etc. Similarly, because these are nanomedicines, they can very easily travel inside the blood cells as well. And that's why with the flow of the blood, they can very easily travel inside your body. So in this manner, a very targeted medicine can be made. That medicines are only targeting the areas which are infected, areas where the problem is. And that's why these kind of areas we can see that nanorobots can be very, very useful. Then after that, in outer space applications, many a times, let's say if you have heard of any of the unmanned missions. So in case of unmanned mission, what happens? In case of unmanned missions, we know that the mission may be very risky. You are going to very far off celestial body. So in all these cases, we would not want to risk a human life. Correct? So these are the areas where robots can take place of the humans, and it can travel according to whatever we want, and it can carry out the functions in space according to our requirements. So this is how a robot will be useful in outer space explorations as well. For example, if you have heard of Vyomitra, a humanoid robot which is going to accompany the people who are going to travel in Gaganyaan mission, right? So this is what this Vyomitra also is, nothing but a humanoid robot, and this is going to accompany the Vyomnauts or the astronauts who are going to go in the Gaganyaan mission. So in this manner, we know that in outer space applications also, we can make the use of robotics. Now, apart from these areas that we have seen, there are many areas where we can make the use of robotics. And as I said, that this is still a developing phase in robotics. So there are a lot of things that will keep coming. And that's why from the perspective of applications, what I also want you to do is that whenever you come across any article in your newspapers with respect to robotics, always make sure that you are compiling them in maybe just 2 sentences, maybe just 4 sentences, but along with the notes that you are making for your examination. So that when you are revising the topics, you have all the applications or at least all the recent developments with you.